We got? Well, welcome to Rupp Arena at our STLP State Championship. I'm David Couch with the Kentucky Department of Education, and thanks for joining us, those that couldn't make it here. We're going to have around 12 to 15,000 here today to our STLP State Championship. And I've asked one of the superintendents of our school districts, Benny Lau, but Benny's played many roles with us over the years. When I first met Benny was when KETS first started, the Kentucky Education Technology System. Benny was part of our original group of KETS coordinators that helped make connections with school districts. And then I can remember you went on to Barron County. And I know you were involved with the education technology there, but you also had leadership roles there. And now you've gone on to become superintendent in Metcalf. But before I met you, you were a teacher.
I was a teacher, 7th and 8th grade in Metcalf County, small little K-8 school there, science and social studies, and started incorporating technology in the late 80s.
So another way I met you is your daughter. I can remember when she was part of STLP, we took a picture of her and a shirt that went down to like almost her ankles. We kept it on there.
Just a little toddler at that time.
She's a little bit older now.
Yeah, a little bit.
We started this back in 1994. So this is 25th year. You're getting old.
I know. I understand, and you are too.
So one of the things I wanted you to talk to the folks about, that we have all of our students and teachers here, is from your perspective the importance of education technology, just not in the classroom, but the STLP event, which you have always participated in some way, even as superintendent, judging and helping us any way that you could in both the region and state.
Well, to see technology first, education technology in all our schools every day. We have one elementary, one middle, and one high, and I tend to be in and out on a regular basis of all those. You know, one of the dreams I know we all had from those early days, David, if you well remember, is that the technology would be transparent. That we're not doing technology, but we're learning, and technology is supporting that. And I think with the advent of the cloud, specifically Chromebooks, I think we've now realized that. So I see students every day doing great and wonderful learning activities, learning projects, incorporating, being supported by technology, and obviously the digital natives that they are, they're just rolling right through it. STLP then provides the outlet, and I really like that we emphasize the L in STLP, providing those students leadership opportunities. I've seen countless students find their niche, blossom. We have some of those kids here today that really found themselves due to technology. And again, not just because they're doing technology, because they've taken on projects that have been allowed to really come to fruition because technology supports it.
You know what's interesting? I was in a meeting of my peers at state government, and I didn't know all of them. And so at the end of it, we were given a chance to kind of give an update on something cool we wanted to do to our peers and other parts of state government. And so I talked about the STLP event. And what I found interesting, now there's only 15 of us in the room, the lady to my left talked about her daughter being a part of STLP and the tremendous benefit that was throughout her life. And then the next lady to her left said, oh, by the way, I was part of STLP, and it's the reason I went into the profession I went into.
There you go.
And then that night, on the news was an STLP project. They had their STLP shirts on, and they were helping, came up with an application for Alzheimer's patients and people. So to see it from our early days, to see it come to fruition where we're at, and as you're saying, is this not for the students? I was at an event in Pikeville 2 days ago, and there was 180 different presentations, and so I sat in, they were 8 minutes long, and I sat in on like 24 of them. I bet, Benny, 20 of them, of those 24, the teachers were talking technology in some kind of way. So it wasn't advertised as a technology topic, but all through it was all the things that we've been part of for the past 25 years and plus of putting in place.
You know, I'll have people from time to time when I'm speaking or working with a group, and they'll ask me, well, are you a one-to-one district? And I frankly have to stop and think, because we are, but we've never tried to make anything of that because it occurred naturally, it just evolved. And why wouldn't you be? Why wouldn't there be access and all to that? I want to say quickly, you brought up my daughter. She's now 26, an occupational therapist. And I dare say till this day she would tell you the skills, abilities, and things she learned, even though you don't think of an occupational therapist being a technical field, I guarantee she would credit STLP to a lot that she has gained and success she's had.
And and I agree with that, I see that in every aspect. Part of being a leader is also being a good servant and a volunteer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what we see here at this event, what folks see, what people say, well, let me talk to your division of STLP. I said, we don't have a division. We have one person. And this whole thing counts on volunteers at the regional like you and the state level like you to make this happen. Because we have 55,000 students that are part of this, and we had 1,800 projects that started out. And now at the end of tonight, we're going to have 3 state championships, 3 state champions in elementary, middle school, and high school. And then we're going to identify an overall technical one and send them, this year we sent them to Google, Microsoft, and Apple. But what a great experience, because I know a lot of these kids, and I'll always ask, how many is the first time you've been to Lexington? Probably 80% of them. How many people in Rupp Arena? Probably 95% of them. And a lot of them have they've been out of their county, but maybe not the county beside their county. So what a great event. And I always tell folks one of the biggest reasons we do this is so these students can see that their thoughts, their ideas, and their skills are just as competitive with anybody else. And they're part of the state and any other part of the state.
And mentioning the education piece in our classroom and our class work. So, as I said earlier, when I walk in a classroom and I see the technology being used, we'll have projects here today out of a social studies class. We'll have projects here today out of a science class that just develop naturally coming from that. And to see those kids have those ideas and to see them take that and then take it to the next level. And we talk a lot about our students, but obviously they have to have a tremendous amount of classroom support, staff support, all of you see around here, of course, we're predominantly students. Every adult here is to be cherished and to be honored for what they do to allow those students to make it work possible.
And during our award ceremony, we always highlight students, give a high five or something to those that made a great opportunity happen for you, because at the classroom level, the school level, the district level, state level, all these volunteers, just not for the Kentucky Department of Education, but all these different organizations that we have, higher education as well, really helps us make this happen. In fact, if we were able to turn the cameras, you would see, I don't know if it's possible, and Andy's talking to folks here, can we show the cameras of the people helping it? So you can see that this is a student-run webcast as well, which is awesome to have them help us participate in this, and we always are interested in them. And a lot of these projects are associated with them doing something similar within their own school district. Well, Benny, thanks for stopping by. Is there any other final
I appreciate
words of wisdom you'd like to give us?
As I'm nearing down toward the end of my career, I hope this is something I can support, remain involved in, because I know, I think back, you mentioned 1994, I think STLP truly started with one young man who kept pressing us to do things. Then we printed some buttons up that one year, and we maybe had a dozen or so kids, and now 12,000.
To see what it's turned into.
Tremendous.
It's a fun thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate being here. Have a great day.
Thank you. So Benny Lyle, one of our great supporters and all around pretty good guy.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to have
UK football fan.
And UK football fan. Had a good year last year following that. So next up here is going to be with Mike. Mike, come on up. And I'll just do a brief introduction before Mike starts speaking. We just had the 2019 legislative session come to an end. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things that are related to that. Now, there are some laws that passed during the legislative session. Senate Bill 1 came into fruition during the legislative session. It was all about school safety. And so that is actually in place right now. And there's also things we keep our eyeball on legislative session, because even though they don't pass, doesn't mean they won't come back in a future session. So typically what we find in legislative sessions, it takes 2 or 3 times for something to go through the legislative process to become law. So we always keep our eyeball on those that didn't make it all the way through, because they're likely to come up again, and what can we do before the next one comes up in the next January timeframe, to kind of address some of the things in place where maybe it keeps that from having to become law because it's already taken care of. So the first one I want to talk about was Senate Bill 1. That's all about school safety and the technology components of that. And I don't know where Andy and Megan are at, but if we could bring up poll question number 1 up on the screen. Can we bring up poll question number 1 up? All right, good. And so let me try to see if I can see that. Okay. So the question is, we were asking all of you to respond to, is what do you think is going to be the most popular way? And boy, you just answered my question out of the ways that we think. So let's talk about those 4. Just leave those up on the screen just for a little bit, and let's talk about those 4. The law that just was passed required the ability to call it in, email, and also a mobile app. So in working with the Kentucky Homeland Security Office and the Center for School Safety, even though the law doesn't require it, we're going to ask a 4th one. In fact, my mom even calls text messaging email a lot for the average person. And we do know what's text messaging is that probably is one of the best ways we're finding for a school to communicate with a parent. And so when talking with Homeland Security on telephone calls, when I ask them right now, and this is not the K-12 calls coming in, when I ask them what is the most frequent way that you get communicated with, about 5 times on average a month someone calls in something to Homeland Security from Kentucky. So in other words, it's very, very, very little. If you could put that graph back up, just 1, just keep it on 1. I'm just going to talk about it for a little bit. So we find phone calls is very little. You saw from the stat up here where electronic mail, right now the Center for School Safety already offers an application for that. And so it's called Stop It, and you send an email to that, anybody can, a student, a parent, adult of any kind, and it automatically is routed to the right person in the school district, a superintendent, a principal, assistant principal, and whoever handles that. The 3rd one is a mobile device application, and what we're finding that's really is going to be not really an application, but more so pointing you to a website. And that website will point you right back to the email part. So the text messaging is the one that we anticipated being the most popular, and your notes have confirmed it, and I know we don't have tons of people responding to that, but part of this is, the reason I want to know this is a heads up to school districts and even the Homeland Security and the Center for School Safety that a lot of the reports that are coming by text messaging, and are you staffed appropriately to keep up and investigate all the text messages?
And we've got that same result requiring other ways, the text messaging.
Yeah, so we see that's going to be a very, very popular way to do it. So you can come back on here to talk about the next part here. So the next one that did not become law, that we're going to spend time on, and we talked about in our CIO Summit, is about internet content management or filtering, or someone keeping an eyeball on the students of using the internet while they are at home. And where does the responsibility of the school end, and where does the responsibility of the parent and student begin? So, for example, anybody using their personal smartphone and their personally owned devices, I think it's pretty well known that is a parent responsibility and a student responsibility. The other component that it is let's say a school allows a laptop to come home, and where does that responsibility end? And for most school districts, I know for my child, when that went home, there had to be an agreement, an accepted use policy that was signed by both the student and the parent that said basically when this leaves our school premises, the parent and student is responsible for where they go at on the parent's internet that they provide at home. So you're going to see, and this was from our CIO Summit, is you're going to see us come out, and it's probably one of the biggest documents that we're going to create, and the earliest ones, is guidance to school districts about what is and what is not required as far as internet content management from a child's home, regardless device, but also from a school-owned device, and giving, that it's not required by any federal law, definitely not SIPA requiring it, the Child Internet Protection Act. Nothing requires it in state law, any one that we've ever put in place. And what are the plus and minuses and risks that a school takes on by starting getting that business of taking ownership of internet content management at the parent's home through the parent's internet service. So that legislation, and it was not as detailed as that. This legislation that came about was a legislator wanting parents to be aware, and the school districts play a role and be aware that there's sexually explicit information on the internet and to take precautions at home. But in the context of that, we know we need to educate folks better about that topic, and it came clear with the CIO summit that we have that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So those are the two big ones that were technology related. Obviously in every session you have probably 10 or 20 that could turn into that, but those were the big ones. You know, the school accountability, that passed, that was Senate Bill 175, that indirectly affects this technology with our school report card. So we were keeping an eyeball on that one about where it went. And so the good news about that one from the school report card is that's not going to impact our deadlines that we had to get that part out in the fall timeframe. So next up, I got Mike Lettingham here with me and to talk about what I think was a pretty major success for us, Mike. E-rate, I always consider Kentucky, and I know you're more hesitant to do that, is one of the top 3 states when you look at the amount of money that we apply for and we get per student. If you're doing it on a per student basis, obviously California and Texas are huge states, so you're going to beat us in the amounts. But when you do per student, we've always been a pretty good maximizer of the system since it first started back in 1998. So I wanted you to give kind of an update on what we have, both Category 2, which this was a 5-year window that closed for certain districts. Category 1, what we applied for and what we expect to get back.
Yeah, so I completely agree in the fact that we here in Kentucky are a leader nationally as far as maximizing E-rate, have been ever since the program began. Continue to be so. I have a lot of people kind of envious of that in other states that I talk with and work with. So we want to kind of give an update on over the last webcast, maybe 1 or 2, we talked about the fact that we needed all the districts to really make sure they were filing for all the things that they had an opportunity to do so. We know we're going into the 5th year of what is a 5-year budget that the E-rate program put into place. There's no guarantee that same budget guarantee, close to a guarantee that you'll get funding will occur after this 5th year, so we really encouraged all districts to maximize that, and we certainly saw that districts did respond to that. So just to give some numbers, totally for the state, we applied for pre-discounted over $52 million. Now that's pre-discounted, so that's the total amount of dollars that we applied for. That equates to about about $43 million in discounted or in potential federal funds coming back to the state. So that's a huge dollar that potentially can come back into the state. That's an up to amount. For the districts, that was about $31 million. $31 million that can up to $31 million can come back to school districts that they filed for. And so, again, that's a huge.
So the grand total of the districts and the state level is
the grand total of the school districts and what we apply for at the state was $43 million, $43.5 million. For the school districts alone, it was $31 million. So, and I think just everybody does understand, we file on behalf of all school districts for the connectivity that's provided to all school districts, all schools across the state, and the internet access.
We have some students in here that are pretty pumped about E-rate. It sounds like.
I hear them giving a shout out. Just a quick reminder on E-rate. Remember, as you do get those funding commitment decisions coming back, or you start your services, you have 120 days to respond with a 486 form acknowledging that. If you don't, you're putting your funding in jeopardy. So just keep that in mind, everybody out there, that we want to make sure that we do that. A couple other things I'll mention, David. I don't know what else you wanted to kind of talk about on that, but offers of assistance. Yep. The third offers of assistance is in progress. Actually, school districts, I'd say some school districts have already seen that this week. That's $5 per ADA. I know that the School Facilities Construction Commission is actively sending those notices out to the school districts and began that this week. So school districts should be seeing that going on. So, and just to go ahead, we project the same amount of offers next year as what we had this year. So
in circling back, I do appreciate. I know we made a big push in March to make sure people are aware, especially those districts, I call them year 5. This was the last year they could apply. To apply for that, especially if you still had a need. And also make you aware that there are folks way beyond Katy that are keeping an eyeball on how well, just not Kentucky, but every state applied for things they were eligible for. And we showed the Education Superhighway Report, which identified X number, but there's other external organizations that keep up with that. And they're, I'm okay with that because they're saying, did you maximize your opportunities? And I think that's a fair thing of anyone that pays federal and state taxes, are you maximizing that opportunity? And so one of the roles that we played was trying to make sure that superintendents and EdTech leaders were aware that a possible opportunity was ending. And if you didn't maximize, we want to maximize it anyway, but if you didn't maximize it, we may have to answer some questions about why.
And obviously we encourage maximizing the E-rate program every year that the program has existed. We don't expect the program to go away. We do expect it to continue next year. However, as we've emphasized over the communications on this for the last month or two, this particular budget kind of cycle that they identified is in its 5th year. And it's just, again, the kind of way we've described it, as close as a guarantee as we could have that you will get funded if you apply. Again, we do expect the program to be around next year. We expect for it to continue. There's nothing that's any indication. I want to make sure everybody's clear on that. We don't expect the program to go away, but it could revert back to where some districts are going to struggle to get the actual funding because of their discount rates and so forth.
And that was really the purpose of that 5-year window. Was it was kind of the way, as you've always described it, our way to do unmet need.
Right.
And we've always fussed about that program really not having that.
Right.
And so this was a way to say every school district, regardless of how wealthy or how poor you are, this is your chance to get a shot at Category 2 funds.
Yeah, and we're very hopeful that they reenact the 5-year budget, and that they continue that, because it has worked well. It's been recognized as working well by several different national programs. The FCC has to do a new rulemaking that governs the E-rate program sometime during the summer probably, and we're hopeful that they reenact that 5-year budget.
But I can tell you also, it was a good thing because you did have, and it wasn't necessarily in Kentucky, but across the country, you had districts abusing that because they were applying for funds, and they were of a certain level of poverty. They were applying for it every 2 or 3 years, and they were replacing high-end electronics every 2 or 3 years when they have a much longer.
That didn't necessarily need to be replaced yet. Therefore, you had school districts in different parts of the nation, including Kentucky, that weren't getting funding. So it did level the playing field for the programs.
And I think it was part, not necessarily the school districts in those states that was happening to. They were being gamed a bit by vendors. And vendors say, you need to replace it, you have to have the latest and greatest. So I liked it had a 5-year window.
Yeah, it had a little bit of a racket going on to it.
Yeah, they had a little racket going to it. I think so. I think that cleaned it up. And E-rate program does a lot of audits, investigations, and just randomly. But sometimes they do them specifically. And I know those ones specifically of other states have been where it's been they've been kind of a racket, and they were in kind of hoots with somebody that convinced them they need to replace it much more often, and they really didn't. So I think this is a good thing. And the Cats offer side, I did want to spend a little time on this table in front of us. These are our. This is a brand new state championship trophies. We give one to our middle school champion, our elementary school, and our high school champion. We changed the design of them. I think these are really pretty cool designs that we have in place this year. I think the state champions will like that. And I also think that our overall technology champion will get one similar to this.
And these are awesome trophies. I know they look good if you see them on camera, but they look good live. I'm just going to put a plug in here. My son got one as part of what he does in band. He plays percussion, and it was the same style, but it was a lot smaller. But it was still pretty cool.
And just so you know, the license plate that we have on the very front here, I think most know that Jeff Sobolski leads this program for us, but the very first person to do this was Elaine Harrison. And the license plate that you see right in front of me was Elaine Harrison's license plate, which I keep in my office and,
awesome job
and bring around. So Elaine is here. I'm sure Elaine is here somewhere amongst all this.
Did you want to hit on testing while I was
Let's talk about online testing.
All right. So, obviously we've mentioned the last a couple of webcasts about just the emphasis on online testing. It's not like a new subject or anything. However, there is a really focused effort on online testing now. It's going to be a great avenue and a needed avenue for us to advocate for continued funding for technology. So we certainly are going to be focusing on that. We need for school districts to be a part of that discussion and to be sharing that same word as we move forward with online testing, the importance of obviously the technology aspect of that and the funding that we're going to need to have the right devices available, to have the network where it needs to be, and so forth. So, this year, We've got the, I think it's 10th grade summative testing that's been going on, still going on for math and reading. And there's been 49,000 tests, I think is the number I had, that's been completed in that area. And then the other testing that we'll have going on is the 11th grade for science and writing, on-demand writing. So that's going to be going on up until, I think, about 2 weeks until the school year ends.
20, yeah. So are you talking about the test, or the field test, or the real test?
The field test.
The field test. So I think it's like, I saw April 26th.
April 26th.
I think is when the field test ends.
That's for the 10th grade. For the first one I mentioned.
Yeah, right,
That's 15th through the 26th. The science and the writing is started April 8th, and it goes up until 2 weeks before school ends. That's the way I've got that captured. Work with your assessment coordinators in the districts.
I think the clarification I got from Paul Shoemaker, who does a great job staying in contact with our assessment accountability folks, and also Pearson, and I saw Roger Irvin as well, and he talked about those number of tests is not necessarily the number of students, because right now the field test is you have students taking math and reading.
Yeah.
So you almost cut it in half of those. That's actually what we say is the number of students that are participating in it. But I got to tell you, so far it appears to be going extremely well.
Absolutely.
And we had great success last spring with our end of course testing. And so if we have that with the summative testing, it gives confidence. And I think there's a couple different things that I'd like to bring out as we're talking about it. So we met with Pearson telephonically about 2 weeks ago. And for those that don't keep up closely with this, there are some other states to the south of us that had a disaster with online testing. And it was a major front page story, an embarrassment to their Department of Education. And so when we talked with Pearson about what makes Kentucky different from the other states, I think there are two things. One is, and they tell us this, and you folks hear me say this all the time, Kentucky is unique in the United States in a very positive way as far as our product standardization, what we have. My peers in the other 49 states would love to have this. And because we have the high-speed network in every school district and every school, also as we work with providers, they're just like dumbfounded.
Right.
Just not that we have internet, but the quality that we have that's going to every district office and school, and our product standardization along the way, just not the networking components, but just about every other component, is something they see in no other state. So obviously when they're trying to set something up, it is much easier to set up an online testing environment in Kentucky than it is any other test they're involved with. And also Pearson is one of the major players in just education in general, but online testing. And so we spent some time with them talking about DDoS attacks. And because obviously that will come into the mix of someone not wanting to take an online test, so I'm going to issue a DDoS attack. And so we talked to them about what we do at DDoS in K-12, but also what they do as a provider for DDoS attacks, and felt pretty comfortable about that one, and can talk about that in more detail. We don't want to encourage anyone to do a DDoS attack, so obviously, but I'm impressed with the precautions and the designs they have to take on just not a DDoS attack, but a pretty large.
And those are realistic challenges that everybody has when it comes to online testing. And like you said, we're well positioned here in Kentucky because of things we've been doing for years to be able to, the standardization really minimizes the complexity that when we work with a new partner, like on online testing, being able to do that successfully.
So I think, we see DDoS attacks at the beginning of the school year, and that's always, we suspect, from those that don't want to come back to school early, their students are saying, I'm not ready for the summer to end. Right. But obviously online testing is another one. I don't want to take an online test. And so we have to take the precautions associated with that. So I don't want it to be lost that we talked about the funding aspect of this.
That's right.
As we go into the next legislative session, we're going to ask just not to keep the funding, but to extend it for a couple different reasons. This explosion that we're seeing at all grade levels, it just used to be high school, now it's gone to middle school, now middle school to elementary school, and the use of technology, but also the demand for devices, almost a one-to-one down to those grade levels. Even at the event I was at 2 days ago in Hazard, you had first and second grade teachers wanting one-to-one. And they talked about all the benefits of it the same way a high school, middle school teacher would. We know the demands of the content. We are mainly video learners, visual learners. image and video, so that takes a lot of bandwidth, but also online testing. So those are going to be the three reasons that we're going to ask for an increase of funding, and this is normal. We would do it every 6 to 8 years.
And as we said, we need districts to be engaged in that conversation and talking to their local legislators and leaders to support our efforts there, because it takes all of us to advocate for that need.
Well, I'd say two things. Make sure they know we have a high-speed network, but also the need of it to keep it and to improve it. I'm going to give an example of that a little bit later. So Mike, thanks for joining me.
And come see STLP. It's one of the greatest things I get to brag on when I get to go to different national events representing Kentucky.
It is.
And people are definitely envious of what we do here with STLP.
It is. Come on, Dee Dee. So I'm going to give an update on Dee Dee Conner will be joining me next. And do we have someone kind of looking at Go Soapbox?
We do. They actually are showing on the screens up there when we get to those
I mean, just the questions that we're getting from people writing.
Yeah, we're getting some numbers. We don't have a whole lot, but we've got
No, I'm talking about people asking a question. You know, not the poll question. Them just the discussion question. So, okay. So if you can take a look at that, I'm going to introduce another topic. Do we have anybody asking a question? Now, I don't need the question yet, not yet. But just anyone that may be, just popping something up that's rolling to the top. So let's talk about, and this part's going to be brief, a follow-up on the common themes from our CIO Summit in March. Is we have cumulatively gathered all the tables feedback. We're going through and de-identifying specific districts in it. My intention is, much like last year, to share that statewide. So people can see the thoughts of the 21 tables of EdTech leaders that we had on each one of these topics, so they can see their feedback on it. But we're toward the final part of, I've read through it once, and I'm getting ready to read through it a second time, of the thoughts on that. But you see all of that comes in. Probably the biggest one, the one that you'll see earlier, the three topics, is the one that we talked about, is the cyber safety one that was related to internet access at the home. You heard me talk about that just a little bit earlier. That is some guidance and words of wisdom that we're going to get out to school districts. Obviously, you'll be part of us creating the draft and seeing the draft and getting that in final version, along with the wide audience, about where does this parents' role and the students' role begin and the school's roles end when it comes to internet content and using internet tools, whether school issued or parent bought at the home. The second item that we spent a lot of time on, and we're still spending time on, is the people side of education technology, specifically the 6 pillars of leadership. And so we're going through now the process of saying, what is the best way? For example, any of those that watching now, you say, we can see from the feedback, I just do purely operations, that's all I do, that's all the superintendent asked me to do, that's all I focus on. I don't focus on the other 5. And so when I talk to superintendents, what I tell them is, if no one in your district is being identified as doing those other 5, that means you, superintendent, are the one doing that. Because it's not nobody, it'll fall on the superintendent. So the question will be to those superintendents, do they want to join like a webcast like this, or whoever else they've identified, or do they want your position as the technology leader, CIO, is take the information you get from a webcast like this or any document we send out and inform them. So that's the process we're going through, and we appreciate the feedback that we have. And we recognize some of you say, just send it all straight to the superintendent, but the superintendent may, when we talk to them, say, well, I don't have the time to sit there and be part of webcast. So I'm going to count on this person to do that for me. So that's a process we're going through right now. And the security one is one that will probably take faster action on the passwords for the state level systems, of doing those probably annually. And the district can do it more frequently than that, but we feel uncomfortable with not doing it, forcing a password change for systems that we manage at the state level at least annually. And that will do something about the stale accounts. And we'll talk about the stale accounts. And I know when we talk about these kind of things, and Dee Dee's been around me enough, there's always these 1% exceptions. And in any discussion, I say, well, we won't ignore those, but if that's a 1%, we're going to move this over here and not let that 1% dominate 99% of the conversation. What are we going to do for this 99%? And then this 1%, how are we going to deal with that? And so whenever I get in this discussion, I get these 1% unique situations, 1 in a million, And not that we'll ignore them, they'll put them over the side, but how do we deal with those 1 in a million? But how do we deal with the 99% in those? And to be honest with you, and I'm going to talk with Phil again, what we do with virus protection, when I looked at it, it almost looks like it's split right down the middle, 50-50, which is always a tough call about how we do that. And smaller districts are wanting us to stay more heavily involved and understand because of the personnel shortages they have. And they just can't keep up with the updates to that. So that one's going to take a little bit more time, but we're going to make a call on it one way or another. But appreciate the feedback we got from that. Dee Dee, next up is just a data systems update. Now, once again, as I introduce Dee Dee, you may say, I do nothing with data. I have zero responsibility of data. But I'm asking you, until we get this straightened out with your superintendent about who is the right person to be the overall person we talk with data, take that discussion back to them. But you also we have X number, and it's smaller, that also have the role of data, or at least the role of coordinating with the right people in the district with data. So data update.
I want to start off by just thanking the CIOs out there that do help communicate our messages, because we have a lot of that. Most recently, we had our Infinite Campus user group trainings across the state. We always have 8 sessions through about 2 weeks across the state. KDE goes out there and we do an update as part of that with Infinite Campus. And we had great participation. Almost 200 people participated in those 2 weeks. So we thank those of you that passed that information along. I think there's a poll question. The second poll question.
Poll question 2?
The second poll question is about how many of you do know that folks went to those sessions. That is a really good opportunity to get information on new tools, things that are going on that are going to be pertinent and need to be known this time of the year. So do try to make sure that if you didn't have anybody go, take a look at the CASIS training page off our website, and you can download the user, actually the training PowerPoint that we used during that session. So you at least get the KDE portion of it, and always can reach out to Lisa Roten for information. So there is some additional Infinite Campus training coming up this summer. Infinite Campus is having some sessions. At that same page, you can find out more information about those training sessions. It's like a $600 charge to send 5 people. Take advantage of it. It's hard to compete with all this excitement, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at your results.
Oh, okay.
I can see that screen better.
When you were here before, there was a little boy that was sitting here, and he was not all that little. He was jumping up and down. Anybody that thought he was on a trampoline, he was not. He was jumping on concrete. He was right behind you, jumping on concrete. So it looked like that. And the Robo Challenge people here are having lots of fun. So we do have a lot of, there's not a great number of people. You maybe don't know that you had people there, but please take advantage of those training opportunities. We've got another training that's going to be happening next week. That's our end of the year training. We're focused on what you need to do by the end of the year and some reminders. So it may not be you that should be sitting in that, but we stick to a very strict agenda on that. So you can have people come in and out based on the agenda items on who needs to be there. So if you can help us coordinate that and participation, we usually get over 200 people participating in any of those online trainings. We do them 3 times a year. So again, we do appreciate your help in getting that information to the right people. So the next thing I wanted to mention, and it's the next question also, is that we've got the school report card, a spring release, just about ready. So this month in April, we've got your CFOs, your financial officers are out there entering information. They're verifying what KD entered at the district level, and then at the school level, they're entering spending per student numbers. That's quite a calculation. That's not something somebody's going to do in a couple hours. So, help us make sure your financial officers are aware of it and are working towards that and not putting that off to the last minute, because the plan is that window closes April 30th, and we're going to open the school report card maybe as early as May 3rd. So, we're not, we're really going to be pushing hard to get the remaining data in there. So, it looks like we've got folks that have said they're not started yet. I hope that, those that say they're not started, please make sure your folks that need to know. That's very important. That is a federal reporting requirement for schools and districts. have to report that information. KDE does that on your behalf through the school report card so that you don't have to create your own school report card. So it is important to make sure that gets done. And I know the Kentucky Board of Education is very interested in this finance data, and I'm sure others are too, that are eagerly awaiting it to come out, and it's better be right. We don't want it to be wrong.
What's the date that's supposed to be?
It's got to be entered by April 30th, but it should go public on May 3rd.
Yeah.
That first week of May is what we're shooting for. So the third thing I wanted to mention, this is a reminder, and this thanks goes out to you as well as a lot of STLP students out there. We always try to help, encourage you to get STLP engaged in the collection of the front door coordinates, the GIS coordinates. So if you have relocated front doors, relocated schools, or you have brand new construction, please make sure that all of those have been mapped. Monday is Earth Day, and we always celebrate this, and that's kind of our activity around Earth Day. So that is the day. If there's a reason you need a little extra time, just reach out to us. That's not a magic date. We usually give you a few extra days anyway, but if you need some extra time, please let us know, and please get that information updated. That data is used in the school report card. It is shared with the Commonwealth Office of Technology and shared with other entities beyond that. So. One last reminder, and that's the civil rights data collection. The civil rights data collection is to be completed by April 22nd. So we're right upon that date too. We're hopeful that most of you all have completed that data, and you're in good shape there. Most of the data did get entered by KDE, but that still means that districts have to review that data, and the data that we do not have available to load has to be entered locally, and that's at the school level and the district level. So please make sure and help us make sure that somebody is on point for that. So I think those are my reminders, and I don't really have anything else unless...
Just probably for us, and is the school report card is one of the things that we report on. Definitely. From our office to the Board of Education. It's one of their top things that they're initiatives that they're keeping an eyeball on.
Right.
And so we have 4 metrics that we're going to take a look at. One is with the Bright Lights portion, one was the open house portion, one's Kentucky Stats, and the other one is the Infinite Campus portion, is how many students and parents are interacting with those, and so those are metrics that we can get. The other one is the feedback that we have from districts, that we hit the right things in the main landing page, but also from parents. Is we know all the districts have been made aware of the school report card, have all the teachers, they should by now, but the challenge is also how many parents are both aware and somewhat educated on the different parts of the report card, and that's not anything that we can do.
Right.
But that's something that we're going to be asking districts is, how well your parents aware of the school report card. And one of the reasons I say that is something I went to in Hazard 2 days ago, is there's a school district there that's spending a lot of time with their parents and their students and their staff, showing them how the data of them individually and how that fits into a bigger picture.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that you like to see. And they've even created what they call data folders, and so now they understand the power of data. So one of the ones that came up in my mind was school report card. And this is not anything for you to answer, but just as a FYI, is how well are your parents aware and how well are your parents educated on these tools about data that are primarily put in place for them.
Right. And we're starting to look at those numbers right now, and we're seeing about 20,000 unique users that have hit these sites. That's pretty good, but that's obviously not the numbers we would like to see long term. The first thing is that there's a requirement that it be linked to every one of your school and district pages, and we actually look at the numbers, the Google Analytics that show the numbers of connections that are coming from school and district websites. They're very low. So it does make us wonder if that connection has been made to that, and if you're actually connecting directly to your school URL versus maybe the homepage. If you connected directly to our landing page, the statewide landing page, we wouldn't necessarily see that they were coming from you, because that would be coming from there
when
first.
Our webcast for Franklin County, we asked them what percentage of parents you think use the portal, Infinite Campus portal, and it was like a really low percentage. And talking with and I appreciate the superintendent being straight up about that, but he also said they need to be more intentional about making parents aware of it. Do things in a lot of different kind of events that they're intentional about, hey, by the way, parents, this versus sending a note home that may not get on the radar screen of them. Every kind of event is trying to think about how can I work in making parents aware of that. So this is the same kind of thing.
We had a great opportunity with the user groups to kind of get some feedback from some of the districts and schools on what they're doing, and they're doing great things with open houses to introduce it. They're excited about. Not all of them knew that we produce a report every month that shows the student usage of the parent-student portal. So those kind of things are helpful for you, and they're available every month on our webpage.
Yep. Well, so once again, one of the main reasons of the federal law was reaching out, trying to make parents aware of what's going on in their schools. So obviously, we want to follow up on that attention. If you could look at, for me, one of the discussion questions we asked and respond to is about online testing. And this is the time frame, and I want to more emphasize it before. We're getting the countdown. Somebody's counting down. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Robo challenge. Those people are having fun.
They're very serious. Very serious about it. But we're in a very limited amount of time to where we can get feedback on this field test.
Right.
And so if something's not going right, this is the time. The example I use, I'm not to give a specific district, but it made sense. So you had a well-meaning assessment coordinator that wanted to load everybody else everybody in the gymnasium and take the test at the same time, because that would make it easy for them. Now, in the days of paper books and pamphlets, that probably made a lot of sense. But in the days of, just like we're in Rupp Arena here, and I was in the Yum Center before, there's only so many people that can get on the network at the same time, even when you're watching a ball game here.
Right.
And so when you're taking an online test, the average person does not have a feel for, there's only a certain amount of people that can be on a network at the same time, especially a Wi-Fi network. And when you go over it, you can't get on. So in this gymnasium, they did not have enough DITS wireless to have that many computers doing that task. And so that's the blind spot that the assessment coordinator had associated with that. So this is the time frame to work through all those and bring those up to folks' attention. Like I say, it ends on April the 26th. So what I want you to do with this section is bring to my attention anything that you think we need to be aware of at the state level, along with online testing, before we do the real deal here in the May time frame. So this is the time to learn. It's a really cool opportunity for us to learn. So
we got one comment, and it says it's going well so far. So this is not obviously your only time to comment. If you see things that you feel like could be improved upon, or you maybe aren't working like you think they would, we still want you to reach out to us and let us know, because it doesn't have to just be through this vehicle.
Right. Well, thanks, Dee Dee.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. So as we close up, got one more topic and a few cleanups here. So I went to a summit in Eastern Kentucky. It's called the FIRE Summit, Forging Innovation in Rural Education. And this thing had 180 different sessions, 8 minutes apiece. And so, I go in and I listen to 7 sessions at a pop, and I did sit in on 21 of them. And you really could have called this a teacher technology conference versus, we have a student technology, because I bet 90% of those 21 projects, even though they didn't have technology in their name, you had no idea it was coming, is those teachers talked about how they use a technology tool in some aspect of what they're trying to do. The other thing that really caught me, I was surprised about, is how many first and second and third grade teachers, and you all out there may already know this, want a one-to-one also. For all the same reasons the older grades want to, a more engaging experience. They can keep students occupied, the whole class period as they advance through one thing, they can on their own go to another advanced part and not really be held back associated with it. And all the differentiated learning styles that students can have. And also, by the way, as Benny Lyle mentioned earlier here, the devices have become so inexpensive, it now allows for you to move to one-to-one at very young grade levels. The one part that did bother me, and I'm going to make a teaching point with this. One of the teachers said, our technology here in Eastern Kentucky, is not as good as other parts of the state. So she said that to this whole group that she was presenting to. So I asked her when it all got finished, why she said that. What were the kind of things that she had in mind? I wasn't being critical of her. I just said, I just want to understand it. And her first response was, well, very few of our schools in Eastern Kentucky have internet access to the school, which obviously about died. That if you don't know, all of our schools are connected to the internet. We did it. We became the first state to do that back in 1995 to every district. And by the way, we did that in 11 months. So the ask that I have of you, and you've heard me say it before, you have people on your staff, you have community leaders, you have, these folks don't know. And when they come to a setting, and I've mentioned other settings where folks from your community, and I know you can't educate them all, come and they talk about things, and especially in certain parts of the state saying, I don't have internet access to my school yet, is obvious they don't know. Now she said, I do have it at my school, but I heard that very few schools in Eastern Kentucky have internet access to the school. And by the way, the State Education Technology Directors Association in Washington, D.C. put out a major press release last week identifying and highlighting Kentucky K-12 education technology leadership for being a pioneer and leader in most aspects of technology, including having the internet in place for every school district in Kentucky in 1995. So you can't get that message out enough. I know you know it, but you must assume virtually no one else knows it. And I would ask one more ask, is make sure when you talk about it, say not only does our school have internet access, every school in Kentucky does. Because right now people are assuming we are dead last in internet access to our schools, and it's actually the opposite. We're the top in the nation when you talk about internet access to the school and the quality that we have going to every school. They also talked about in this section about the data notebooks, and these data notebooks were all in paper form, and their intention, I asked you to move that over to electronic, and their intention is yes, but there are some things they said on paper are better for people to visually see. Now just a heads up, I wasn't aware of this, there's a strategy in the instruction called ACT. It's not the test, but it's a different type of thing, and I noticed that in a lot of different presentations. And then the amount of formative testing that's occurring, and using mobile devices, not clickers, and using forms created in Google Forms for that feedback. But my last point on this is you can almost sit in every session. And I encourage you, even though that's not technology, go sit in something your school district's doing that looks like it's such a pure academic thing. And it does two things. It shows that your interest from a technology perspective in what they're doing academically. But I guarantee you're going to learn a lot of things they're doing academically with technology that you weren't aware of. You've seen some of the FYIs that we have at the end. I don't think anyone asked a question about those for me to cover it more in depth. I did want to make a clerical change. I think most of you know I'm traveling the state doing the people side of education technology with all the superintendents and make sure they understand the amounts and types of people that we need playing all these 6 different roles within the districts. There are 2 cooperatives I haven't hit yet. I'm going to GREC, not WKC as in my original note, on 1 May, and WKEC on May 22nd. And when I do those 2, I will have completed the state. And that won't be the only, we'll keep on doing it as you all asked us to do in a variety of ways. So I appreciate you all joining us. I appreciate our student team as part of our support cast for STLP. And as Mike Ledingham said, if you've never come and seen one of these at the state level, it's truly a neat experience. But thanks all for what you do, and we'll see you next month. Take care.